I've been putting this vlog off for a reason, I swear. Hey guys, it's Katie and welcome back to Music Major Vlogs. Except, can I even still call it that anymore? I swear every time I get congratulated on graduating, it feels a little bit like being congratulated on being selected for the Hunger Games. It's like, welcome to being a real adult! May the odds be ever in your favor. In this video, I'm going to talk about my experiences student teaching during the spring 2021 semester, and at the end of the video, I'm going to announce some big news that has some pretty big implications for the future of this channel. So if that's all you're here for, you can skip ahead to this timestamp. I won't take it personally. This video is probably longer than I wanted it to be. So student teaching during a pandemic. I'm sure nobody will be surprised to hear that it was interesting. Remember in my last semester recap video, I talked about how no one had student teaching placements yet, and then I got mine like right after filming that video? For as much as I complained about how late that came, I take it all back, because I think I was actually one of the first people to get placed. As you would imagine, a lot of schools were really hesitant to take student teachers this year, and it took forever to find placements for everyone. And don't forget also, for music, we had to do 2 placements because our certification is K-12. So we had to do primary one half of the semester and secondary the other half of the semester. A lot of people didn't get their second placement until well after the semester started, and even as late as the first day of term, they were still finalizing first placements for a couple people. Plus, there are always a few incidents where one placement doesn't work for some reason, and then a new one has to be arranged, and so on and so forth. All of that chaos sounds very stressful to me, and especially being the neurodivergent hot mess that I am, I don't think I would have handled it very well. I don't know what lottery I won that I got both of my placements before Christmas, but thank God, because it gave me the time I needed to actually process. So both of my placements were in the same district, which of course for privacy purposes will remain unnamed. You could make the argument that I might have gotten more out of having 2 placements in different districts, and there's merit to that. But on the other hand, staying in the same district made my transition halfway through a lot smoother than it would have been otherwise. And in a school year like this, things that proceed in an orderly fashion are our friends. Both of my co-ops were Westchester grads, and both of them had plenty of experience with student teachers. The first school I was placed at was an intermediate school that served grades 5 through 6, although I really only ended up teaching grade 6. Since they weren't able to do full band this year, the band director didn't start any new 5th grade beginners. As for the 6th graders, they had received one 30-minute lesson a week in groups ranging from 1 to 4 students. And these were homogenous groups, by which I mean they were all trombone or all clarinet, etc. There was no mixing of instruments. And most of these lessons were in person too. Seriously, whose good graces did I get into to get this awesome placement? I'm sure it's not a surprise that I was better at teaching some instruments than others. For instance, I was pretty comfortable with most brass instruments, whereas woodwinds, meh. Also, the smaller the group, the easier the lesson. Not that any of these groups were big, but the lessons where there was just one kid were easily the most productive. You know what I didn't expect that I feel like I should have expected? That I actually, really loved teaching French horn. Hear me out. I thought French horn, being my primary instrument, would be all the more stressful because I was afraid I would be more inclined to talk over students' heads. Plus, because it's my primary instrument, the expectations of me would be higher, or at least my expectations of myself. But it turns out 12 years of playing an instrument actually counts for something. There was a particular day of the week that I taught 3 of the same lesson in a row. First to a group of trumpets, then to a French horn, and finally to a group of trombones. I taught the same material for these lessons because all of these students were at roughly the same skill level, and with all of these being brass lessons, I had a certain level of comfort with all of them. But even teaching the same material 3 lessons in a row, not only am I noticeably more comfortable as soon as I pick up my horn, my entire demeanor changes. Same thing goes for the other horn student I taught on a different day. And granted, these lessons also had the advantage of being one-on-one, but it was still noticeably different from a one-on-one trumpet lesson. Every other instrument, I really have to think about what to say. Even if it's stuff I know really well that transfers over from playing horn, I'm still very conscious about it. But the moment I start teaching horn, my instinct takes over, and I almost always know exactly what to say. I shocked myself, honestly, and this isn't to say that I didn't do well with any of the other lessons, because I think in the end I did well with everything. But French horn was like flipping a switch. It was incredible. And then of course there were the woodwind lessons. As you can imagine, I was a lot less comfortable with those. I'm not good at playing them myself, and frankly, I really need to learn my saxophone fingerings, but you don't need to be amazing at something in order to teach it, and both my teaching and my playing really improved as time passed. People always seem astonished astonished when I tell them that I had to learn the basics of pretty much every instrument for my degree, but you gotta keep in mind that there's a difference between being a good player and a good musician. And once you've learned one instrument, a lot of those skills transfer over to other instruments. It's like the Avatar. He spends the first 12 years of his life learning airbending, and then the skills and discipline he's learned from that transfer over to the other elements, which makes it possible for him to learn the rest of the elements in under a year, at least well enough to save the world. And remember how hard a time Aang had learning earthbending? It's because it was his natural opposite. Fewer of his skills from airbending transferred over to earthbending, whereas water and firebending came to him a lot easier. Somebody watching this has no idea what I'm talking about, and if you are that person, go watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's on Netflix. You'll thank me later. How do you guys think instruments correspond to the elements? Maybe brass is air, woodwinds are water, percussion is earth, and strings are fire? That's how I would categorize them. Let me know if you have other thoughts in the comments. Anyway, that was the tangent of tangents. Let's talk about my second placement because I suddenly had a lot more to do. I mean, in the first half, literally all I had to do was teach lessons, and I had plenty of time during the school day to plan. For the second half of the semester, I moved across the street to the junior-senior high school, which served grades 7 to 12. And now all of a sudden I had to teach junior high band, senior high band, 3 piano classes, and 1 guitar class. I mean, I was expecting the second half of the semester to slap me in the face a little bit with the time commitment, but just because I knew it was coming didn't make it easier. It was also amplified by the fact that at this point, in around mid-March, the school was starting to cut back on COVID restrictions. I mean, we still had to space out the kids and wear masks, of course, but a week before I started there, the junior-senior high school switched from a hybrid schedule to full-time in-person learning. For perspective on how big a shift this was, the student teacher who was at that school before me, who I switched places with, said that before the switch to full-time, he saw each class once a week. After the switch to full-time, I saw each class every other day. I pretty much had to do double the work that he did, which is not to discredit him or anything, of course, but I went from teaching 30-minute lessons once a week to 80-minute classes 2 or 3 times a week. The change in pace was dramatic, and it took a while for me to get used to it. Also, I never want to go through an 80-minute class again, as a teacher or student. It was killer. And you can say whatever you want about, oh, but that kind of pace is what it's like in a normal school year. Okay, great. But for a young teacher, it's a lot, pandemic or no pandemic. They really do expect teachers to sell their souls to their jobs, don't they? And people wonder why teachers complain about being underpaid. But let's talk about what I actually had to do in this placement. I guess I'll start with the 2 bands. Since we still had to keep the kids 6 feet apart, we couldn't do full band in the band room with either group. With spring starting, my co-op wanted to do band outside as much as possible, but sadly the weather did not work out in our favor very often. So we would have to split the band into 2 or 3 groups between the band room, the choir room, and the tent we had set up on the grass outside. The only time that we could keep the whole class in the band room was with junior high band on the days that we were missing all of the chorus kids, which in this case was like half the band. The band director from the intermediate school would come up to help with these rehearsals as much as he could, and he and my co-op would rotate between the groups, and they would move rather than making the kids move. Once I was there long enough, it was me and my co-op switching between groups, each of us working on a different piece. With junior high band, I worked primarily on The Red Balloon by Anne McGinty, which is a really nice piece, but man, I was sick of it by the time it was over. That was also the piece I got observed on, so I'll probably forever associate that piece with a high level of stress. Senior high band, I was usually working on El Capitan or 3 Airs from Gloucester, the latter of which was a flex arrangement, which I've never really been a fan of. But when your instrumentation is wacky, such as when you have to split into small groups, a lot of times they really are the only good option. When I wasn't conducting, a lot of times I would be playing alongside the kids, which usually meant playing trumpet because there was only one French horn in the school and she wasn't always there. I did play bells at one point though. Oh, and toward the very end, we took them through some marching band basics to prepare for a parade, and a lot of these kids had never marched before because of the pandemic putting a halt to it last fall. I just love how quickly all of that stuff came back to me. It is drilled into my head until the day I die. Because bear in mind, I haven't done marching band in almost 2 years either, which is kind of scary. But let's talk about guitar. I don't know, if we're still considering brass to be airbending, then maybe strings are earthbending because I'm so bad at guitar. I really didn't end up teaching that class very often for one reason or another, but I learned a lot from watching my co-op teach it. Guitar was one of the last method classes I took before student teaching, and the problem with a lot of these method classes is they try to teach you the instrument but don't really teach you how to teach the instrument. And guitar especially, my professor's approach to that class was very technical. It was a lot of here's what to do and how to do it, and not a lot of why do we need this? My co-op's approach with the high schoolers was a lot easier to follow because he focused a lot more on applying the skills that he taught. It wasn't just this is a 1-6-4-5 chord progression, it was you can use this chord progression to play all of these songs. I think I learned more in the first 2 days of watching him teach that class than I did in all of the previous semester. And it's far more applicable to things outside of class. The main reason people like to learn guitar and piano over other instruments is so they can play along to their favorite songs. As much as this might upset some classically trained musicians out there, guitar players in general don't need to know how to read music. That's not why they took this class. They want to learn how people play in pop bands, and that's why my co-ops class was a lot more engaging than my methods class. And I've retained a lot more too. I mean, I still suck, but less than before. Piano, meanwhile, used very similar curriculum to guitar, and unlike guitar, I'm actually half decent at piano, considering I took lessons from 1st grade all the way to 7th grade. Since this class was structured a lot more like a traditional class than band, and since there were several different sections of it, I decided to use this class to complete a requirement called an SLO, which stands for Student Learning Objective. Basically, it's a unit plan where the teacher sets a goal for themselves on how much they want the student to improve from start to finish, which they measure by giving a pre-test and post-test. It's dumb. Or at least it's dumb for a music class in my opinion, but I had to do it anyway. I taught them how to read lead sheet symbols and ultimate guitar style lyric sheets. Plus I taught them about all different kinds of 7th chords, augmented and diminished chords, alterations, extensions. I probably threw in more than I needed to. But my goal wasn't necessarily for them to be able to play all of these chords perfectly. I wanted them to know and understand all of these lead sheet symbols so that if they ever came across them when they're looking for a song to play, they at least know what they're looking at. Because anybody who's done a little bit of exploring on Ultimate Guitar knows that sometimes the people who rate the lead sheet go a little harder than they need to. It is the Wikipedia of lead sheet charts. I was careful not to turn this into too much of a music theory lesson because this is still supposed to be piano class, and I think I had mixed success on that front, but I did improve as I went along. This was all in the last 3 weeks, by the way, because in typical ADHD fashion, I of course pushed everything off as long as I possibly could. Of course I wrote the lesson plans the night before I had to teach them. The amount of sleep I got in that time was pitiful, and I will learn nothing from this. I finished student teaching the second to last day of the semester, and I still had to finish the actual SLO document and turn all of my lesson outlines into formal lesson plans. So on the last day of the semester, I made a point to get myself up at school time, and I finished all of that in one non-stop 6-hour stretch. Of course, then I wasn't really packed for move out the next day. A lot of things got thrown in random garbage bags. But before I talk about graduation, I want to circle back real quick because there were a couple other things happening in this semester. First, I still had weekly horn lessons, which now that my recital was over were something of a formality, but that's not to say I didn't get anything out of them. But my teacher told me at the beginning of the semester, and she said I could quote her on this, "I don't care how much you're practicing this semester because this should not be your focus while you're student teaching." Thank you. I love you. I really wanted to make a point to practice every day after school, but with how tired I was by the time I got home each day, that fell apart pretty quickly. And then there was wind ensemble, which was always the highlight of my week. So last semester and the first half of this semester, we had to split into 2 groups, either woodwinds and brass or just split right down the middle. We rehearsed on the stage with plastic dividers in between us. It was like being in cubicles and it was so hard to hear. Each group would have different music that was selected based on the instrumentation, and we would periodically record concerts. For the second half of this semester though, after what was spring break for everybody who wasn't student teaching, the band director decided we were finally gonna get the whole group back together by rehearsing outside, weather permitting. We were all thoroughly briefed on the fact that we'd be pretty much out of luck if we happened to have a rainy spring, but thankfully, more often than not, we were able to have full band rehearsal outside. This was my first time playing with this whole ensemble, and it was the light of my life. Wind ensemble in and of itself is awesome because it's the top band and everyone's amazing, but I also absolutely adored the music we were playing. We played Come Sunday by Omar Thomas and Symphony No. 7 by David Maslanka. Both are amazing pieces that you should look up. In early May, we live streamed our outdoor concert, and it was the band's first live performance in 14 months. Of all the concerts I played in 4 years at Westchester, that one was by far my favorite. All good things must come to an end though, and inevitably, graduation day finally came. I don't think it really hit me until we were walking in and I heard, "Introducing the class of 2021! And Pomp and Circumstance started playing, and I was like, oh sh**. Pomp and Circumstance, by the way. Terrible song. I had to say it. So of course the next couple days after that consisted of that classic post-college feeling of, what now? I applied to a couple general music jobs. I had one interview and made myself look like a fool, not gonna lie. I don't think I'd be ready to teach full-time next year. I'm unsure of myself. I don't feel like I'm mature enough to handle a classroom by myself. I'm only 22. I'm baby. Not to worry though, because just a couple days after graduation, another opportunity presented itself. Which brings me to my big news. I am pleased to announce that on July 1st, I was accepted to none other than the Disney College program, which I will be starting on August 16th. For those of you who don't know, the Disney College program is a paid internship that gives college students the opportunity to live and work in the Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando, Florida. This is something I've always dreamed of doing, but when the parks closed for COVID last March, the program was suspended with no indication of when it would return. But the program has been restarted for the fall 2021 semester. General applications opened just a couple days after graduation, and I applied immediately. You know what was hilarious was that I got the acceptance email like 10 minutes before I had to leave to go teach a lesson. So I'm driving almost 30 minutes to this kid's house up on cloud 9. And then when I get there, I'm like, all right, brain, come back to me. Trumpet, we need to think about trumpet now. Now, what I'm actually going to be doing while I'm working in Disney, I don't know yet. I could be working attractions, merchandise, food and beverage, custodial, any number of things. And I could be at any of the theme parks or any of the resorts. I would love to do children's activities, especially considering I have a degree in education. Disney, if you're watching. I will be living in Disney's brand new housing complex for the DCP. It's called Flamingo Crossings Village, and it is gorgeous. What does that mean for the future of my channel? Well, a lot of people like to vlog their DCP, and that is exactly what I plan to do, so long as I can keep up with it. I'm definitely gonna vlog move-in week, and then I'll reevaluate. So look out for that in hopefully August, assuming I can learn to edit in a timely fashion. Let's not forget how long it took me to edit my Disney vlogs last time. Until then, if you liked this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that bell for more from me. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. The links are in the description down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you real soon.